So we are live. All right, good evening, everybody who's out there right now joining us. We're going to just give it another minute or so, and then we'll jump into the program. Okay. Deborah, Galia, Michael, you ready? Shall we begin? Okay. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Jewish Family Children's Services of Greater Philadelphia to the Click with JFCS program. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, and hope you're all staying safe and sound during this coronavirus pandemic. My name is Lee Rosenfield, and I will be your host for the evening. And again, I want to welcome you to Click with JFCS. We're really very excited to be bringing you this programming tonight. The programming that we're going to offer this evening is very important to our LGBT community. It's our way of helping you, of helping the community at large to stay connected during these difficult times. The Click at JFCS has an extensive array of online programming, activities, and advice, and Jewish Family and Children's Services is always there for you and always available to be a resource for you and your family and community. This evening, I'm joined by three very distinguished colleagues. The first is Deborah Bornstein. Deborah is the Director of Donor and Event Operations for JFCS. So welcome, Deborah.
Thank you.
And I am also joined by Galia Godel, who is the Program Manager for JFCS's LGBTQ initiative. Welcome, Galia.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, we have Michael Byrne, who is the mobile therapist for older adults at JFCS. So welcome to the three of you, and thank you for taking time this evening to be with all of us. Deborah will be monitoring all of the questions and comments that you all have, and we invite you to post your questions and your comments in the chat box, and we will certainly address those as we go through the course of the conversation tonight. The conversation is really designed to help you, the LGBT community, around issues of isolation and loneliness during the coronavirus, as well as to try to provide for various coping strategies to deal with the pandemic. And then lastly, our goal is to really provide you with key community resources that will help you navigate through the pandemic as well. So with that being said, Deborah, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I think it's going to be very impactful and meaningful.
Great. So I will start us off by asking some questions to Galia and Michael. Let's start in the space of isolation and loneliness. So what are you finding to be some of the biggest issues that the LGBTQ community is dealing with during this crisis?
So during this crisis, a lot of folks are facing an unprecedented experience of isolation, of not being able to leave their homes and to interact with their friends and family. And that is an even more prevalent issue in the LGBTQ community. For LGBTQ folks, it can be very difficult to find supportive communities, to have family members who are willing to accept your entire identity, and to find a safe group of people who are there for you when you need them. And as we are in an experience of heightened isolation, that compounds on top of those difficulties for LGBTQ folks to find and interact with meaningful connections and the people that they love.
Michael?
I agree. Especially around the holiday time, if people are estranged from their birth family for whatever reason, being estranged from our chosen families during the pandemic just heightens that feeling of isolation and that feeling of being alone. Which loneliness affects us not only physically, but mentally, but it affects us physically as well, especially our older adults.
So, I mean, just picking up on that point, what do you think folks can really be doing right now to combat their sense of loneliness or isolation?
One of the things that's very important for folks to do is to find an online community or connections with people who you can talk to on the telephone that is explicitly LGBTQ affirming. One of the really joyful things that has come out of the pandemic is recognizing how many meaningful connections exist. There are so many support groups and so many religious organizations streaming services online, but many of those are not affirming of LGBTQ identities. So it's very important for folks to find those virtual and telephone connections in a place that is explicitly affirming.
Michael, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, one thing that we forget about, because if we're sitting alone and we're feeling lonely and we're feeling that nobody's thinking about us, but people are popping into our head all day long, right? So when that happens, send an instant message on Facebook, send a text. You don't have to get into a big long conversation, but you can reach out and just be like, thinking about you, because also not only are you letting that person that you're sending that text to, that friend or lover or whoever, you're sending a little bit of love out to them, but that also is increasing the love in your own heart. So, putting that positive message out into the universe gets returned to you immediately by making yourself feel better too.
That's a great point. As you were both speaking, and we had a chance to discuss this even briefly ourselves, it feels, for those of us who grew up in the 80s and or certainly came of our own identity as LGBT people in the 80s, we grew up during the AIDS crisis and the AIDS epidemic. And this is obviously, different, but at the same time, there's that feeling, those feelings of loneliness and isolation. And back then, we really weren't as welcomed or included in society at large. It's amazing what 30 years or 40 years will do. And I'm just wondering how both of you reflect back on that, and kind of are there lessons to be learned? Are there comparisons to be had from then to now? Maybe Michael, I'll start with you.
Yeah, there are a lot of comparisons, and I think different for different generations, right? So I think younger generations are feeling a lot of the same feelings that, I felt in the early 80s and through the 80s of, when is it going to be me? Am I going to get this? When am I going to get this? Am I going to die? And then who else is going to die, and who else is going to get this? And then your mind starts racing, right? And then your heart starts beating faster. So there was a lot of that happening for everyone back in the 80s of who's next and when is it going to be me? but then we also have, for older folks, there is a AIDS survivor syndrome of having lived through the plague of AIDS and lost friends and lost lovers and lost family, and now losing people again to another illness. So that, the mirroring of those things increases anxiety, and then can also trigger depression. And ways that we can deal with those things, there are many different tools that we can pull on to help get us through those times of anxiety or depression.
It almost feels like a form of post-traumatic stress.
Oh, it absolutely is. And AIDS survivor syndrome is very much a post-traumatic stress disorder that is societal rather than an individual event.
Galia, did you want to add some perspective to that?
So I did not grow up in the 80s, and I did not come into my queer identity until a little bit later than that. But something that I have experienced both with my clients and with my friends is that LGBTQ folks are far less likely to seek medical care, to seek out resources, to take advantage of resources that are available to them, both anecdotally and statistically. And so in this time where there is a global threat to health and life, it is far more likely to affect LGBTQ folks as they are part of a population that simply does not have the same physical or psychological access to resources, which makes it very dangerous.
Why is that?
There's a long history of trauma with healthcare providers, of being dismissed by healthcare providers, of being kicked out of or shunned from social opportunities, of being refused resources. And a lot of folks don't want to repeat that or have an ingrained sense of fear when dealing with social services or medical services. And it means that it takes a lot more to get them over that hurdle before they are willing to seek help or services with a disease that can that can become very deadly so quickly that time delay can make a huge difference.
I mean, I know during, certainly with the AIDS epidemic, there was a lot of stigma attached to the illness and the disease. And I don't think that there's stigma associated with coronavirus per se, at least not yet. And maybe you disagree. And maybe do you tell somebody that you actually had the coronavirus? I don't know what kind of stigma is attached to that. But Michael, to your point, you were saying that there are very specific ways to address some of these feelings that you're having. I wonder if you could just expound on that a little bit more, go a little bit deeper with that.
Absolutely. So the things that just pop into my head first off would be Dbt Skill Building, with radical acceptance. Radical acceptance is the idea that I am going to radically accept this moment right now. So by accepting this moment as it is, we are releasing a whole lot of stress and a whole lot of difficult feelings that go along with that, right? So accepting that, yes, I'm living in this moment and I'm being in this moment. So pulling ourselves into this moment and not living in yesterday, what I did 2 days ago when I went to CVS and there was that lady and she didn't have a mask on and she came within 2 feet of me. Oh my God, I have it. I must have it. Well, hold on. Let's slow it down and live in this moment right now and realize that we can't live in the woulda, shoulda, couldas. We have to stay in this moment. So mindfulness that brings us back into this moment. Now, there's all sorts of different mindfulness skills that people use, and some work better for others than so some people don't like to meditate. They can't turn their brain off. The voice in their head is always talking, and they can't stop. They can't stop themselves from hearing that voice in their head. I love meditating. I do it every day. One way to help that voice, quiet that voice, is by doing guided meditations, so that you're listening to a voice. So there's another voice that's actually speaking, and you're following the directions of the voice. There's a great app for Android and iOS systems called Insight Timer. It's a free app, and you can choose the purpose for your meditation. So whether it's for anxiety or depression or needing to get to sleep, you can choose the theme of your meditation, and then you can also choose the length of your meditation. So you can do a 5-minute, a 10-minute, a 15-minute, an hour and a half. For myself, if I have problems sleeping, I do an hour and a half, and I've never heard the end of the meditation. I've always been asleep. So I think meditating is super, super helpful. But then there are other things that we can do for mindfulness that don't cause us to have to listen to our breath, close your eyes, go through that whole, thing. So adult coloring, if you have an adult coloring book or drawing, it just brings you right into this given moment right now. Or cooking, sewing, giving yourself a facial, doing things that are self-care for yourself, brings, doing your nails, folding laundry. We can pull ourselves, brushing your dog, petting your cat. We can pull ourselves into this moment. Anything that's going to yank us from our thoughts from the Hazarai or the Mishigas in our brains back to this moment and calm ourselves.
That's wonderful. As you were speaking, Michael, one of the thoughts that came into my mind is how the LGBT community really rallied around each other during the AIDS crisis, right? We really only had ourselves in order to survive. Mm-hmm. On every level, social, spiritual, medical. Where does that fall with coronavirus? Where does that land us right now with the current situation that we're in? Do you see any parallels or any learning about how we can really mobilize as our own community to really make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and by extension, our broader community at large? Either of you, Galia?
So one of the things that I've found really beautiful, both through my work at JFCS and when working with the community in general, is that a lot of non-LGBTQ specific organizations have put in countless hours of work into making sure that their services are accessible to LGBTQ individuals. So for a very long time, if you wanted to find that support during the 80s and early 90s, it did have to be within the LGBTQ community. But now there are so many resources and types of support that are genuinely affirming of LGBTQ folks while being run by people who don't identify as somewhere under that umbrella. And while there's absolutely a myriad of resources specifically within the LGBTQ community that we're going to be sharing with folks who are watching right now, it's definitely worth being mentioned that folks don't just have to narrow their search for resources or support to organizations run by LGBTQ individuals. They can find their identities affirmed in so many locations.
That's a great point. Michael?
Yeah, I agree. It's a blessing of 2020, right? That we are affirmed in so many ways by so many different parts of our society. It's great. I know one thing that I do for myself every day, so anxiety and then the depression piece of things of, how do I find happiness when I'm sitting in depression? And situations like this can really, Saturday was a really bad day for me. I've held up pretty well. And then Saturday, I was just like, what? And I really just wanted to be like, it's like, I'm done with this, and now I'm okay again. But Saturday was not a good day for me. But, there are things that we can always do to not necessarily completely yank ourselves out of a depression if you're really deep down in there, right? But there are ways that we can lift ourselves up. And one thing that we can always do is think about the things that we are grateful for. So what are our blessings? And if we take stock of our blessings, I really truly believe that happiness does not bring gratitude. Gratitude brings happiness. And one thing that I'm going to reach into my pocket, I carry around in my pocket with me 24/7, this little stone, and it's my gratitude stone. And so in the morning, before I put it in my pocket, I hold it in my hand and I remind myself of all the things that I'm grateful for. And then at night, when I take it out of my pocket, I remind myself all of the things that I'm grateful for. Then during the day, if the negative voice inside of my head starts talking bad to me, because the voice in our head is not so friendly, so it can tell us all sorts of horrible things. I will catch myself, and I've trained myself to catch the voice when it's talking bad to me, stick my hand in my pocket and remind myself of why I'm grateful and what I'm grateful for. And also flip the script on that voice, because that voice is not telling you the truth. That voice is lying to you. And replace that negative thought with a positive affirmation about yourself, because you are a blessing and you are blessed. And we need to keep reminding ourselves of that.
So for those that are watching who are in relationships, have partners, spouses, or like in my case, children, young children, what perspective should we be sharing with them, or what insights might we learn from kind of taking it beyond just ourselves and kind of looking at ourselves in relationship to our spouses, in our families?
One of the things that I've found to be very valuable, both in my own life and when working with community members, is recognizing that this is an unprecedented emergency and we can't expect to continue on as usual. I've had clients say, the spark has gone out of my romance, date night isn't working, my spouse and I are angry at each other all the time. Does this mean that my relationship is over? And part of that radical acceptance that Michael was talking about also means accepting that some of this is really bad, that you're going to argue more with your partner or your children, that it's going to be difficult to come up with solutions for the problems that you're having, and that this really might be situational, that when this is over and when our lives can expand to the broader world once more, that you will have the opportunity to enjoy the little things like you used to, or to more easily connect with your loved ones. Recognize that things are going to be hard, that part of our experience right now is survival mode, and that that's okay. Our priority has to be on living, and after we focus on living, we can broaden it out into the joy that we have had in previous times.
Galia, that's amazing. Great perspective. Michael or Deborah, do either of you want to comment on that?
I couldn't agree more wholeheartedly with what Galia said.
Yeah, me too.
And just keep loving on yourself, right? because these feelings are completely normal. You're not going crazy. It's not just you that's thinking this or feeling this. Everybody's feeling this.
I agree. I was saying to my daughter that there's not one person on this earth who has been through this before. So we don't have experts. We don't have anybody that can say, well, when it happened in the past. So we're all figuring it out all together. And everybody, as we know, are all different people. And the tools and the tips that you've been sharing have been wonderful. I know I've taken down notes personally. So this has really been great.
Yeah, I think it's really important what we're talking about, because people can kind of, especially if you have like a fatalistic kind of personality, and maybe have been identified as that personality once or twice in the past myself. You might think, oh, my relationship, we're fighting, it's not working anymore. Even if we survive the coronavirus, it's all over. So what you're really saying is just calm down and realize that this is situational. Breathe.
Also, one of the things that is causing so much tension is not just the fact that this is dangerous for our health, that our lives have had to change in these really scary ways, but also that so many of us rely on the people around us, and it's so much more difficult to access them. Not only having coffee with our friends or getting brunch with a loved one or visiting someone in their house, but being in crowds. We can't go to the park and be surrounded by people and get the energy from this in-person contact that we got used to without even realizing it. There are so many steps that we can take. We can do our best to make connections, but we're missing some real things that the internet goes far to help with, but doesn't fix entirely. So one of the pieces of advice that I need to encourage people to try is to reach out more than you even otherwise would. Even if you are connecting with your friends, even if you are talking with your partner, find some kind of group activity through Zoom or Facebook Live to engage with. There are dance parties, there are peer support groups, there is live music from the Metropolitan Opera. Take an extra step that you might not otherwise take to immerse yourself in something larger than just one-on-one connections.
And I think it's going back to what both of you spoke of earlier. I know even for myself, when I have reached out to connect with somebody and they'll say, thank you so much. This really meant so much that you reached out and said hello and checked on me. And it shows me that you care. But likewise, it's very affirming and satisfying to me, and helps me with my own feelings of loneliness or isolation or whatever I'm feeling at a given time.
There's also a lot of stress for folks in our communities who are artists or restaurant workers who are not able to make a living right now. So that's really, really scary. And when the only living that is on paper is what you made on the clock at the restaurant and a percentage of your tips, what can you claim in unemployment compensation? Performing artists are particularly in a stressed position where quite a bit of the funding is not necessarily reported. So, taking advantage of all of the different, there are funds out there that have been created by the Philadelphia Foundation or Pew, or I know there's an artist fund that's out there that, really sit down, apply for those things, and don't beat yourself up that you haven't done it yet. You can do it tomorrow.
And suffice it to say, and I know, Deborah, this is, you're going to address this, but both of you are you're wonderful. The community is very fortunate to have you, and that you're continue to resource even after this Facebook Live conversation. And maybe, Deborah, might you want to speak a little bit more to some of those resources that are available in the community at large.
Well, and feel free to chime in, Galia and Michael, but JFCS does have a number of online support groups. I'll share a link shortly where you can go and see what we have to offer in terms of support groups, in terms of other types of assistance on our website, including, you know, a support group specifically for healthcare workers, another one specifically for healthcare workers' spouses, people that aren't necessarily familiar with technology. So I'll share that link and just, you know, near the end of our time together so that people can easily access them. Galia, do you want to share anything else?
So one of the things that I get to focus on through my position as the program manager of the LGBTQ initiative is one-on-one and small group connections. So I really want to encourage anyone watching this at any point to reach out to me. You can find my email address and phone number on the JFCS website, and my email address is on the resource guide that Deb is going to share in the comments soon. And I can help connect people to resources. I can help find folks support groups that they can connect with. I can talk over Zoom and have a personal connection with folks. And that my position through JFCS that allows me to do that means that whatever your need is, if you have not yet found the right resource for you, the right support group, the right social connection, the right way to connect with other people, that I would be genuinely delighted to connect with anyone watching this to help make some good connections, or to connect with you myself and just be close.
Thank you, Galia. Really, I can't thank you both enough for providing all of the wisdom and insight. I just want to use the opportunity to see if there's any concluding thoughts that we haven't touched on yet that you feel are really important to share with our viewers.
We talked a lot about depression. Is there anything different for those that are feeling a lot of anxiety?
Right. So anxiety is really kind of getting mindful about this moment, pulling ourselves out of our heads and out of the Hazarai in our heads and the feelings that are not necessarily real, and pulling ourselves into this moment that is real. You know, getting our breath back into our bodies. There's a great skill in DBT called the TIP skill, which they're really big on acronyms. So T stands for temperature. I stands for, goodness, now my brain just went sideways. But the temperature piece for if you're really anxious or depressed and your emotions are getting out of control, you don't have control over your emotions, you're having a panic attack, or you're thinking of harming yourself. You know, if you're so depressed that you're thinking of harming yourself, or you're so anxious you're having a panic attack, one thing that you can do is grab some ice or an ice pack out of your freezer, frozen peas out of your freezer, and throw them on the back of your neck. The change in temperature, changing your body's chemistry, changes the way you emotionally feel. I know it sounds weird, but it's true and it works. Same thing with a dive response, filling up a sink with water, taking a deep breath and sticking your face into the water triggers your physical body to think that you have gone for a dive. And so it slows your heart rate. It slows because it's protecting your organs from freezing.
Wow.
And so you are fooling your brain, and your body reacts in a way that calms you down.
It also brings more oxygen to your brain. Your body thinks that it's a whale again, and it's like, oh, we need more oxygen and slow our heartbeat. Google the mammalian dive reflex. It's super cool.
Yeah, it really is.
That's great.
I also want to encourage folks that this is a 30-40 minute conversation where we can provide tips and sort of give a generalized overview, one of the most important things that anyone can do if they are struggling with depression or anxiety, whether it's long-term and chemical or situational because of the pandemic, is to find therapy, whether it is a peer support group, whether it is a small counseling conversation, or whether it is a virtual telehealth appointment with a clinical therapist. Having a person who knows you and who can work one-on-one with you to provide support is incredibly invaluable at all times, but especially now. And there are many, many free, low-cost, and sliding scale therapy options. And there are ones that are directed specifically at the LGBTQ community. One of the things that can be so validating about LGBTQ affirming therapy is having a therapist who understands all of the parts of your life and not just the ones that you feel like you can safely show to someone who doesn't know about your gender or your sexual orientation. So if you have the time to look for a therapist and can afford it, do so. If you don't, reach out to me, reach out to JFCS, and let us provide a referral to you, because having a one-on-one therapist is going to be one of the most valuable things you can do for yourself.
Thank you, Galia. Deborah.
I think that we have had a very robust conversation. I have written so many things down. I hope everybody out there watching has as well. I am going to really quick just share for a moment the phone number and the website for help. So again, JFCS, our phone number 866-532-7669. You can call for information on all different aspects of service. And if we don't specifically provide it, we will help you find somebody that does. And there is also our website for specifically for supports for COVID-19 support. So jfcsphilly.org/COVID-19 resources. Let's see.
And Deborah, will you post in the comments the resource list specifically for the LGBTQ community?
I actually already have done that.
You're the best.
And we are back to our screen. So any closing thoughts, everybody?
So not to go backing up a couple paces, but my brain caught back up with my mouth. The other parts of the tip skill, the I stands for intense exercise. I know there's lots of folks in our community that love to exercise. So, but really doing some major aerobic exercise also changes your body chemistry. Paced breathing, which, as we talked earlier about meditation, and paired muscle relaxation, which is a mindfulness meditation that you are relaxing your body from the top of your head all the way down to your toes. And you can stress out that area and then relax it. And by the time you're done, your body chemistry has returned to normal. But please be good to yourselves. Love yourself.
I want to thank folks who are watching this. The fact that you have signed in on this live stream or are watching the recording later means that you know that you need to take care of yourself, that you need some kind of support. And we really hope that some of what we've talked about today is going to be helpful during this crisis and during this period of stress.
Okay. Well, then on that note, I really want to again thank Michael and Galia for your wisdom, insights, your love for the community, and all your good work. Deborah, we thank you for everything you're doing every day at Jewish Family and Children's Services and facilitating this whole JFCS Click program. And from my family to all of you, stay healthy and be well.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Lee.